Danny Cole checked his screens one more time. The numbers looked good. His small cargo ship, the Pale Wanderer, was on course for the outer colonies. He had made this run many times before. It was boring work, but it paid well. He carried food, medicine, and machine parts to the mining settlements that sat on the edge of human space. He leaned back in his pilot chair and closed his eyes. The ship could fly itself for a while. He needed rest. The journey would take another 3 days, and there was nothing to do but wait. That was when the alarm started screaming. Danny jumped up and looked at his screens. Red lights flashed everywhere. Something had hit his ship. He did not know what. There was nothing on his sensors. No asteroids. No other vessels. But something had torn a hole in his hull, and now his ship was falling apart. He tried to regain control. He pulled at the controls and pushed buttons. Nothing worked. The Pale Wanderer was spinning now, caught in the gravity of a planet that should not have been there. His map showed empty space in this area. But the planet was real, and it was pulling him down. The ship hit the atmosphere hard. Fire covered the windows. Danny held onto his seat as the vessel shook like it was going to break into pieces. He could hear metal screaming. He could feel the heat coming through the walls. Then everything went black. When Danny opened his eyes, he was lying in dirt. Purple dirt. He blinked and looked around. He was in a forest, but the trees were not green. They were violet and blue, with leaves that glowed softly in the dim light. The sky above was orange, like a sunset that never ended. His ship was gone. Pieces of it were scattered across the forest floor, burning and smoking. He had been thrown clear of the crash somehow. He did not know how he was still alive. Danny tried to move and felt pain shoot through his left arm. It was broken. He could see the bone pushing against the skin. He bit down on his lip to stop himself from screaming. He had to stay calm. He had to think. His suit was damaged. The oxygen filter was making a bad sound, clicking and hissing. It would not last long. Maybe a few hours. Maybe less. He needed to find help, but he did not know where he was. He stood up slowly, holding his broken arm against his chest. The forest was quiet. No birds, no insects. Just the soft hum of the glowing plants around him. Danny started walking. He did not know which direction to go, so he picked one and kept moving. Every step hurt. His head was pounding. His vision was blurry. But he knew that if he stopped, he would die. He walked for what felt like hours. The forest never changed. The same purple trees. The same glowing leaves. The same orange sky. He was beginning to think he was walking in circles. When he heard voices, they were not human voices. Danny stopped and listened. The sounds were sharp and musical, like bells mixed with words. He had heard recordings of alien languages before, but never in person. He had never met an alien face to face. He thought about hiding. But his oxygen filter chose that moment to die completely. It made one last click and then went silent. Danny gasped for air. The atmosphere here was not right for humans. He could breathe it, but it burned his lungs. He would not last long without a working filter. The voices grew louder. Danny saw figures moving through the trees. They were tall and thin, with silver skin that reflected the glow of the plants. Their eyes were large and dark, and they moved with a grace that made them look like they were dancing rather than walking. VELORINS. Danny knew about them. Everyone in human space knew about them. The Valorian Empire was one of the largest powers in the galaxy. They controlled hundreds of worlds and had fleets of ships that could destroy anything in their path. They did not like humans. Most Valorians saw humans as primitive and dangerous, like wild animals that had learned to build spaceships. There were stories about what happened to humans who landed on Valorian worlds. None of them ended well. the Valorians spotted him. They stopped moving and stared at him with those big dark eyes. Danny raised his good hand to show he meant no harm. He tried to speak, but his lungs were burning too much. He coughed and fell to his knees. The Valorians came closer. There were 5 of them, all carrying weapons that looked like long silver rods. One of them said something in that musical language. Danny did not understand the words, but he understood the tone. It was not friendly. They grabbed him and pulled him to his feet. One of them put a device over his mouth. Suddenly, he could breathe again. The air was clean and cool. Danny took deep breaths, filling his damaged lungs, but he was not free. They tied his wrists together with something that felt like metal but moved like rope. Then they started marching him through the forest. Danny did not resist. He could not. He had a broken arm, no weapon, and no idea where he was. His only choice was to go with them and hope for the best. The march lasted for hours. Danny's legs ached. His arm throbbed with every step. But the Valorians did not stop. They did not speak to him. They just walked, their long legs covering ground faster than he could keep up. Finally, they emerged from the forest. Danny looked up and saw something that took his breath away. A city rose before him, but it was not like any city he had seen. The buildings were tall and curved, like they had grown from the ground rather than been built. They twisted toward the sky in spirals of white and gold. Bridges connected them at different levels, and small flying vehicles moved between them like insects. The Valorians pushed Danny forward. They walked through streets filled with more silver-skinned aliens. Everyone stopped to stare at him. Some pointed. Some made sounds that might have been laughter or disgust. Danny kept his head down and kept walking. They brought him to a large building in the center of the city. Inside, he was taken to a room with high ceilings and walls covered in strange symbols. A Valorian sat behind a desk. This one was older, with patterns on his skin that Danny guessed meant he was important. The Valorian looked at Danny for a long time. Then he spoke in broken human language. "You are human. You crashed on our world. This is forbiddance." Danny tried to explain. He told him about the malfunction, about the planet that was not on his maps, about how he was just a cargo hauler trying to do his job. The Valorian listened without expression. When Danny finished, the Valorian said one word: death. Danny felt his stomach drop. He had expected this, but hearing it said out loud was different. He was going to die on an alien world, far from home, and no one would ever know what happened to him. The guards came to take him away. But before they could move, another Valorian burst into the room. This one was young and out of breath. He spoke rapidly in the alien language, his voice urgent. The older Valorian's expression changed. For the first time, he looked surprised. He looked at Danny with new eyes, like he was seeing something he had not noticed before. "You will not die today," the Valorian said slowly. "The Queen wants to see you." Danny did not understand. Why would a queen want to see a human cargo hauler? What could she possibly want from him? He did not have time to ask questions. The guards grabbed him again and took him out of the building. A transport vehicle was waiting. They pushed him inside and closed the door. As the vehicle lifted into the air and flew toward the distant mountains, Danny wondered what was waiting for him. He had survived the crash. He had survived the forest. He had survived the death sentence, but he had a feeling that the hardest part was still to come. The transport flew for a long time. Danny watched through a small window as the landscape changed below him. First there was forest, endless stretches of purple and blue. Then came mountains, tall and white with snow. After that, there were plains of golden grass that moved like waves in the wind. The gods did not speak to him. They sat in silence, watching him with their dark eyes. Danny did not try to talk to them. He knew it would be pointless. His arms still hurt. The pain was a constant reminder of everything that had gone wrong. Just 2 days ago, he had been a simple cargo hauler with a simple life. Now he was a prisoner being taken to meet a queen. The transport began to descend. Danny looked out the window and saw a city larger than anything he had imagined. It spread across a valley, filling every inch of space with towers and domes and bridges. In the center stood a structure so massive that it made everything else look small. It was black, completely black, rising into the sky like a mountain made of glass. The royal palace. Danny swallowed hard. He had seen pictures of Valorian architecture before, but nothing had prepared him for this. The building seemed to absorb the light around it. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. The transport landed on a platform near the base of the palace. The guards pulled Danny out and marched him toward a massive door. The door was decorated with carvings of battles and victories. Danny saw images of Valorian warriors, defeating creatures he did not recognize. He saw ships exploding in space. He saw worlds burning. This was a civilization built on conquest. The door opened, and they entered the palace. The inside was even more impressive than the outside. The walls were covered in gold and silver. Crystals hung from the ceiling, catching light and throwing it in all directions. The floor was so polished that Danny could see his reflection in it, but what caught his attention was what lined the halls. Weapons, thousands of them. Swords and guns and things he had no name for. They were displayed in cases and mounted on walls. Each one had a small plaque beneath it. A guard saw him looking and spoke for the first time. His voice was cold. Trophies. From every species we have conquered. Danny felt sick. He wondered if there were human weapons in this collection. He decided he did not want to know. They walked for a long time. The palace was like a maze, full of turns and stairs and long corridors. Danny tried to remember the path, but it was impossible. He was completely lost. Finally, they reached a pair of doors larger than any they had passed. 2 guards stood on either side, holding weapons that hummed with energy. They looked at Danny with expressions of pure hatred. The doors opened. Danny was pushed into the largest room he had ever seen. The ceiling was so high that it disappeared into shadow. The walls were covered with more weapons and trophies. Hundreds of Valorians stood on either side of a long path that led to the far end of the room. And at the end of that path sat a throne. It was carved from a single piece of black crystal, just like the palace itself. It was sharp and angular, with points that rose like thorns wherever sat in it. The Court of Thorns. Danny had heard stories about this place. It was where the rulers of the Valorian Empire held court, where they made laws and judgments and decisions that affected billions of lives. No human had ever been allowed inside. No human had ever seen the throne. Until now. The queen sat on the throne. She was tall, even for a Valorian. Her silver skin was marked with patterns of deep blue that seemed to glow in the dim light. Her eyes were larger than the others, and they were fixed on Danny as he walked toward her. He could feel everyone watching him. The nobles and advisors and guards all stared with contempt. To them, he was less than nothing. He was a pest that had wandered into their perfect world. Danny walked as straight as he could. His arms screamed with pain. His legs were tired, but he refused to show weakness. He would face whatever came with his head held high. He stopped at the base of the throne and looked up at the queen. Their eyes met. Something passed between them, something Danny could not explain. The queen's expression changed for just a moment, so quickly that no one else would have noticed. But Danny noticed. A Valorian stepped forward. He was older than the queen, with patterns on his skin that marked him as important. His voice filled the chamber, loud and commanding. "I am High Chancellor Vareth, voice of the Empire and servant of the throne. Who comes before the Court of Thorns?" A guard answered. A human found trespassing on the world of Kalara. He crashed his vessel in violation of Imperial law. Vorath turned to Danny. His face showed nothing but disgust. Human, you have committed crimes against the Valorian Empire. You have entered our space without permission. You have landed on our world without authorization. These crimes carry the punishment of death. Danny opened his mouth to speak, but Vorath continued. But your crimes are not yours alone. You represent your species, a species that has violated our borders many times, a species that has stolen resources from our territories, a species that destroyed the patrol vessel Karath 3 years ago, killing 200 of our people. The crowd murmured in agreement. Danny could hear their anger growing. Bowing. Humans are a disease, Vorath said, his voice rising. They spread across the galaxy like a plague, taking whatever they want, destroying whatever they touch. This human must be made an example. His death will send a message to all of humanity that the Valorian Empire will not tolerate their presence. The crowd cheered. Danny felt his hope dying. He had thought the Queen might help him somehow, but she just sat on her throne, watching. She had not moved. She had not spoken. Vorath raised his hand, and the crowd fell silent. I call for the sentence to be carried out immediately. Let this human die in the Court of Thorns, as a warning to all who would challenge our empire. The crowd cheered again. Guards stepped forward, ready to drag Danny away. But then the Queen raised her hand. The room went silent. Not quiet. Silent. Every voice stopped. Every movement froze. All eyes turned to the throne. Queen Salara stood. The court gasped. Royalty did not stand for prisoners. Royalty did not move from the throne during judgment. It was tradition. It was law. But the Queen did not seem to care. She walked down the steps from her throne, each step slow and deliberate. Her gown trailed behind her like a river of starlight. Her eyes never left Danny's face. Vorath stepped forward. My queen, this is most unusual. The prisoner is a human. He does not deserve silence. The queen's voice was soft, but it carried to every corner of the chamber. Vorath's mouth closed immediately. Salara stopped in front of Danny. She was taller than him by nearly a foot. Up close, he could see that the blue patterns on her skin were actually moving, shifting slowly like living things. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she spoke, and her voice was different now. Not the voice of a queen. The voice of someone who remembered. Do you know who I am, human? Danny looked into her eyes. There was something there. Something familiar. Something he had seen before in a very different place. I think I do, he said quietly. The queen smiled. It was a small smile, barely visible. But it was real. Do you remember the asteroid field near the Kalos system? 4 years ago? Danny's heart stopped. He remembered. Of course, he remembered. The court watched in confusion. They did not understand what was happening. They did not know why their queen was speaking to this human like he was something other than a prisoner. But Danny knew, and now he understood why he was still alive. The Court of Thorns had never been so quiet. Hundreds of Valorians stood frozen, their dark eyes fixed on their queen. No one moved. No one spoke. Even the guards at the doors seemed to have stopped breathing. High Chancellor Vorath was the first to recover. He was an old politician, trained in the art of controlling situations. He would not let this moment slip away from him. My queen, he said, his voice smooth and careful, I understand that you feel gratitude toward this human. Such feelings are natural, but we must consider the larger picture. He began to walk slowly, addressing the court as much as the queen. One act of kindness does not erase the crimes of an entire species. The human colonies have violated our borders dozens of times. They have stolen resources from our territories. They have shown disrespect for our laws and our ways. Voreth gestured toward Danny without looking at him. This human may have helped you once, but that does not make him innocent of his species' crimes. He crashed on our world without permission. He saw our cities, our technology, our people. If he is allowed to leave, he will share what he has seen with his own kind. He will give them information that could be used against us. The court murmured in agreement. Voreth smiled slightly. He was regaining control. Personal debts are noble things, he continued. But a queen cannot put personal debts above the safety of her empire. A queen must think of her people first. A queen must be strong, even when it hurts. He turned to face Elara directly. I urge you, my queen, to set aside your feelings and do what must be done. Let the human be executed, as the law demands. Let his death serve as a warning to his kind. Let the empire see that their queen is wise and just and firm. The court waited. All eyes were on the queen now. Would she listen to her chancellor? Would she sacrifice the human who had saved her life? Queen Selara stood perfectly still. Her face showed nothing. She let the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable. Then she spoke. You speak of the larger picture, Chancellor. Let me paint it for you. She walked toward the center of the chamber, her gown flowing behind her like water. The Valorian Empire has stood for 1,000 years. We have conquered worlds. We have defeated enemies. We have built something that will last forever. She turned in a slow circle, looking at each section of the court. But what have we become? We decorate our halls with the weapons of the dead. We teach our children that other species are beneath us. We close our borders and hide behind our fleets, afraid of anything we do not understand. Her voice grew stronger. 4 years ago, I nearly died in an asteroid field. My ship was destroyed. My body was broken. I sent out a distress signal, but I knew no one would come. I was too far from Valorian space. Too far from anyone who cared. She stopped walking and looked at Danny. But someone did come. A human. A member of the species we call primitive and dangerous. He risked his life to save mine. He spent 3 days caring for me, asking nothing in return. When I asked him why, he said it was because I needed help and he was there. Selara turned back to the court. That is not the behavior of a disease. That is not the behavior of a plague. That is the behavior of a person with honor and kindness in his heart. Laura stepped forward. My queen, one example does not. I am not finished. The words were sharp. Vorath stopped moving immediately. I have sat on this throne for 3 years, Selara continued. I have listened to advisors like you, Chancellor. I have been told what to think and what to say and what to do. I have been patient. I have been careful. Her eyes flashed with something dangerous. But I will not stand here and watch an innocent man die because of his species. I will not let fear and hatred guide my hand. I am the queen of this empire, and I will decide what is just. She walked toward Danny. The court watched in stunned silence. With each step, the tension in the room grew thicker. Selara stopped directly in front of him. She was close enough that he could see the patterns on her skin shifting and moving. Close enough that he could see the emotion in her eyes. Danny Cole, she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. You saved my life 4 years ago. I told you then that I would not forget. I told you that I owed you a debt I could not repay. She placed her hand on his shoulder. A gasp ran through the court. Royalty did not touch aliens. Royalty did not show such familiarity. Today, I repay that debt. Selara turned to face the court. Her hand remained on Danny's shoulder, a visible sign of her protection. By the ancient right of the throne, by the law that binds all Valorians to honor their debts, I declare this human to be mine. The words hit the court like a physical blow. People stumbled backward. Voices rose in shock and confusion. "He is my human," the queen shouted, her voice ringing through the chamber. "And no one shall harm him." The court fell into stillness. In Valorian tradition, a royal claim of personal debt was absolute. It was older than the empire itself, rooted in the ancient codes that had governed their people since the beginning. When a member of the royal family declared someone to be under their protection, that person became untouchable. To harm them was to challenge the throne directly. No one had invoked this right in over 500 years. Many had forgotten it existed, but Selara had not forgotten. High Chancellor Vara stood with his mouth hanging open. His careful plans had been destroyed in a single moment. He tried to speak, but no words came out. The other nobles and advisors looked at each other in confusion. They did not know how to react. Their queen had just done something unprecedented, and they had no idea what would happen next. Danny stood in the middle of it all, feeling the weight of hundreds of eyes on him. He was still a prisoner. His arm was still broken. His clothes were still dirty from the crash, but he was alive. And somehow, impossibly, he was protected by the most powerful person in the empire. Selara squeezed his shoulder gently. It was a small gesture, meant only for him. "I told you I would not forget," she said quietly. Danny looked up at her. He did not know what to say. He did not have words for what he was feeling. "Thank you," he managed. Selara nodded. Then she turned back to the court. "This session is ended. The human will be given quarters in the palace. He will be treated as an honored guest. Anyone who harms him or threatens him will answer to me personally." She walked back to her throne and sat down. Her face was calm now, but her eyes still burned with determination. "You may all leave." The court began to empty. Nobles and advisors filed out, whispering to each other. Guards escorted Danny toward a side door, but their grip was gentler now. They were not dragging a prisoner. They were escorting a guest. As Danny left the chamber, he looked back one last time. Selara was still sitting on her throne, watching him go. Their eyes met across the vast distance of the room. She smiled. Danny smiled back. Whatever happened next, everything had changed. The queen of the Valorian Empire had claimed a human as her own. The court had been forced to accept it. And somewhere in the galaxy, the first small crack had appeared in the wall between two species. It was not much, but it was a start. 4 years earlier, Danny Cole had been running a salvage operation in the Kalos asteroid belt. It was dangerous work, but it paid better than cargo hauling. He would fly between the rocks, scanning for wrecked ships and abandoned equipment. Most of what he found was junk, but sometimes he got lucky. That day, he was not looking for luck. He was looking for a reactor core that had been lost when a mining ship broke apart. The company that owned it was paying good money for its return. Danny had tracked the signal to a dense cluster of asteroids, where the rocks were so close together that flying between them was like threading a needle. He was focused on his sensors when he heard the distress signal. It was weak, barely more than static. But it was there. Someone was out there, alive and in trouble. Danny pulled up the signal's location. It was coming from deep inside the asteroid field, in a place where the rocks were even more dangerous. His computer warned him that the path was risky. There was a good chance he would crash his own ship trying to reach whoever was sending the signal. He thought about ignoring it. The signal was using Valorian frequencies. Valorians and humans were not at war, but they were not friends either. If word got out that he had helped a Valorian, some people in human space would not be happy. It could cause problems, but Danny had never been able to leave someone to die. It was not in his nature. His father had taught him that every life had value, no matter who it belonged to. He turned his ship and flew toward the signal. The path was worse than his computer had predicted. Rocks tumbled around him, spinning and crashing into each other. Danny had to use every bit of skill he had just to stay alive. Twice, he was nearly crushed, 3 times, his shields took hits that almost overloaded them, but he kept going. After an hour of careful flying, he found the source of the signal. It was a small craft, Valorian design, wedged between 2 massive asteroids. The ship was badly damaged. Its hull was cracked. Its engines were dark. It was a miracle it was still in one piece. Danny brought his ship alongside and scanned for life signs. He found one, weak but present. He suited up and crossed the gap between the ships. The Valorian vessel's airlock was stuck, so he had to cut his way in with a laser tool. Inside, the ship was dark and cold. Emergency lights flickered red. The air was thin. He found the pilot in the cockpit. She was young, even by Valorian standards. Her silver skin was pale, and her breathing was shallow. She had injuries on her head and chest. She was dying. Danny carried her back to his ship. It was not easy. Valorians were taller than humans, and even though she was thin, she was heavy. But he managed. He put her in his medical bay and started working on her wounds. He was not a doctor. He did not have fancy equipment, but he had a basic medical kit and a lot of determination. He cleaned her wounds and stopped the bleeding. He gave her oxygen and fluids. He did everything he could think of to keep her alive. For 3 days, she drifted in and out of consciousness. Danny barely slept. He watched over her, checking her vital signs, adjusting her treatment, talking to her even though she could not respond. On the 3rd day, she opened her eyes. She looked at him with those large, dark Valorian eyes. For a moment, she seemed confused. Then she understood. She was on a human ship. A human had saved her. Why? She asked. Her voice was weak, but Danny could hear the question clearly. He shrugged. You needed help. I was there. But I am Valorian. Your people hate us. Danny shook his head. I don't hate you. I don't even know you. All I know is that you were going to die, and I could do something about it. She stared at him for a long time. Then she said, My name is Celara. Danny Cole. Over the next 2 days, Danny repaired her ship while she recovered. They talked during the work. Celara told him she was on a personal journey, traveling alone to see the edges of the Empire before her life became too complicated. She did not explain what that meant, and Danny did not ask. She asked him questions about humans. What they were like, what they believed, why they pushed so hard into space when they were so young as a species. Danny answered honestly. He told her about Earth, about the colonies, about the dream of building something better among the stars. You are different than I expected, Celara said one evening. How so? I was taught that humans are dangerous, unpredictable, that you cannot be trusted. Danny smiled. Some of us are like that. Some of us are not. Same as any species, I guess. Celara thought about that. Perhaps you are right. When her ship was ready, Danny gave her coordinates to the nearest Valorian outpost. She could make it there on her own now. She stood at the airlock of his ship, ready to leave. I owe you my life, she said. I do not know how to repay such a debt. Danny waved his hand. You don't owe me anything. Just be safe. That's enough. Celara looked at him with an expression he could not read. I will not forget this, Danny Cole. I will not forget you. Then she was gone. Danny watched her ship fly away until it disappeared among the asteroids. He never expected to see her again. He never expected to think about her much at all. She was just someone he had helped. That was all. He went back to his salvage work. He found the reactor core. He got paid. Life continued, but he did think about her. More than he expected. There was something about those conversations on his ship that stayed with him. A feeling that he had seen something important. That he had glimpsed a person beneath the alien exterior. Years passed. Danny went back to cargo hauling. He heard news about the Valorian Empire from time to time. Their old queen had died. A new queen had taken the throne. There was talk about changes in their policies, about new attitudes toward other species. Danny did not pay much attention. Politics had never interested him. He was just a hauler, moving goods from one place to another. The affairs of empires were not his concern. Now, standing in the Court of Thorns, he realized how wrong he had been. The young woman he had saved in the asteroid field was now the queen of the most powerful empire in the sector. The personal journey she had mentioned was the last freedom she would ever have before her life became about duty and power and responsibility. And she remembered him. Queen Solara stood before Danny, her eyes bright with something the court had never seen. The nobles and advisors watched in confusion. They did not understand why their queen was looking at this human like he mattered. "I remember everything," Solara said softly. "I remember the cold of my ship. I remember the darkness. I remember thinking I was going to die alone in the void." She paused. Her voice grew stronger. "And I remember the human who came for me, who risked his life to save mine, who asked for nothing in return." The court was completely silent. High Chancellor Vorath looked like he had swallowed something bitter. His carefully planned execution was falling apart. "My queen," he said carefully, "whatever debt you believe you owe this human, it cannot override the law. He is still a trespasser. His species has still committed crimes against the Empire. Personal feelings cannot. Do not speak to me of personal feelings, Chancellor." Solara's voice cut through the chamber like a blade. Vorath stepped back, his face pale. The queen turned to face her court. Her expression was hard now. The softness she had shown Danny was gone, replaced by something fierce and unbreakable. "This man saved my life," she said. "Without his help, I would have died in that asteroid field. There would be no queen. There would be no heir. The throne would have passed to chaos and conflict." She let those words hang in the air. "Everything that has happened since then, every decision I have made, every change I have brought to this empire, exists because of one human who chose kindness when cruelty would have been easier." Danny stood still, barely breathing. He had never expected this. He had never imagined that helping one stranded pilot would lead to this moment. But here he was, and everything was about to change. The days after the declaration were strange and difficult. Danny was given a room in the palace, far from the Court of Thorns, but still within its walls. The room was larger than his entire ship had been, with windows that looked out over the capital city. He had servants who brought him food and clothes. His broken arm was healed by Valorian medical technology in less than a day, but he was still alone. Still a human in a world that did not want him. The news of what had happened in the court spread quickly. Within hours, everyone in the capital knew that their queen had protected a human. Within days, the story had reached every corner of the empire. People were talking. Some were confused. Some were angry. Some were curious. High Chancellor Vorath did not give up easily. He could not harm Danny directly, but he could make his life difficult. He gathered support among the noble families, whispering about the queen's strange behavior, questioning her judgment. He suggested that perhaps she had been weakened by her experience 4 years ago, that perhaps the human had done something to her mind. Some people believed him. Old hatreds were hard to break, but Solara was not afraid. She had made her choice, and she would stand by it. She began to visit Danny in his room. At first, the visits were short. She would ask how he was doing, make sure he had everything he needed. But over time, the visits grew longer. They would talk for hours, just as they had on his ship 4 years ago. Danny told her about his life in human space. He talked about the colonies, about the miners and farmers and traders who were trying to build new lives far from Earth. He talked about the good parts and the bad parts. The hope and the struggle. Sailora told him about her life as queen. She talked about the pressure and the loneliness, about the weight of ruling an empire that had been built on conquest. She talked about her dreams of change, of building something different. "My people have been afraid for too long," she said one evening. "Afraid of anything different. Afraid of anything we cannot control. That fear has made us strong, but it has also made us cruel." Danny nodded. "Humans can be the same way. We push out into space because we are curious. But we also push because we are afraid of being left behind. Perhaps we are not so different after all," Sailora said. "Perhaps not." The weeks turned into months. Danny became a familiar sight in the palace. At first, the Valorians who saw him would stop and stare. Some would move away, afraid to be near a human. But slowly, things began to change. A young servant started talking to him. Then a guard. Then a cook who was curious about human food. One by one, people began to see Danny not as a threat, but as a person. Sailora watched this happen with quiet satisfaction. She had known that fear came from ignorance. She had hoped that exposure would lead to understanding. And she was right, but not everyone was convinced. Vareth continued to push against the Queen's decisions. He demanded that Danny be confined to his room. He argued that allowing a human to walk freely through the palace was dangerous. He warned that other species would see this as weakness. Sailora refused every demand. "If we show that we can accept one human," she said during a council meeting, "perhaps we can learn to accept others. Perhaps we can build something better than constant fear." Voreth slammed his hand on the table. "You would destroy 1,000 years of tradition for one alien. You would tear apart everything our ancestors built." "Our ancestors built an empire on war," Sailora replied calmly. "I want to build one on something more lasting." The council was divided. Some supported the Queen. Some supported the Chancellor. The debate went on for hours, growing more heated with each passing minute. Finally, Danny asked to speak. The council fell silent. A human had never addressed them before. Voreth objected, but Sailora allowed it. Danny stood before the council, feeling the weight of their stares. He was not a speaker. He was not trained in politics or diplomacy. He was just a cargo hauler who had stumbled into something much bigger than himself. But he spoke anyway. "I know you do not trust me," he said. "I know you think my species is dangerous. Maybe some of us are. But I also know that 4 years ago, I found a woman dying in an asteroid field, and I helped her because it was the right thing to do. I did not think about politics. I did not think about war. I just saw someone who needed help." He looked around the room. "That is what most humans are like. We make mistakes. We fight. We do stupid things. But most of us just want to live our lives and take care of the people we love. We are not a disease. We are not a plague. We are just people trying to find our way in a very big universe." He took a breath. "I did not ask for any of this. I did not want to be a symbol or an example. But if my being here can help even one Valorian see that humans are not monsters, then maybe something good can come from all of this." The council was silent when he finished. Even Voreth had nothing to say. That night, Sailora announced that she would open formal talks with the Human Federation. It would be the first direct communication between the two powers in decades. There would be resistance. There would be problems. But it was a start. Over the following months, Danny worked alongside the Queen to build bridges between their peoples. He was not an official diplomat, but he was something more valuable. He was proof that understanding was possible. The talks were slow and difficult. Old wounds did not heal easily. There were setbacks and arguments and moments when everything seemed ready to fall apart. But they kept trying. On the anniversary of Danny's arrival in the Court of Thorns, Sailora held a ceremony in the same chamber where she had once saved his life. Diplomats from the Human Federation were present, along with representatives from a dozen Valorian worlds. The Queen announced a formal treaty. Not an alliance, not yet, but an agreement to stop the fighting. An agreement to talk instead of shoot. An agreement to try. The court applauded. Even some of Varth's supporters had come around. The old chancellor himself stood in the back, his face unreadable. He had lost this battle, but he was not gone entirely. There would be more struggles ahead. That evening, Danny found Celara standing on a balcony outside the palace. She was looking up at the stars. "You changed everything," she said without turning around. Danny walked up beside her. "I just did what anyone should do." She finally looked at him. Her eyes were bright, not with tears but with something like joy. "That is exactly why you changed everything. Most people do not do what they should. They do what is easy or what is safe or what others expect. You saw a stranger dying and chose to help. That choice led to this moment." Danny looked up at the sky. Somewhere up there, human and Valorian ships were passing each other without firing. It was a small thing, but it was also enormous. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now we keep building. One step at a time. One conversation at a time. One person at a time." She smiled at him. "You should stay. Help me with this work. Be the bridge between our peoples." Danny thought about his old life. The cargo runs. The lonely journeys through empty space. The small ship that was now scattered across a purple forest on a distant world. That life was gone. But maybe something better was waiting. "Okay," he said. "I will stay." Celara reached out and took his hand. It was a simple gesture, but it meant everything above them. The stars shone down on a galaxy that was slowly, carefully, beginning to change. It would take years. It would take generations. There would be more struggles, more conflicts, more moments when everything seemed hopeless. But the first step had been taken. And it had all started with one ordinary man who chose kindness over fear, and one queen who refused to forget. The story was not over. It was just beginning. And sometimes, that is the best kind of ending.